My name is Marcus, and I am 32 years old. That day when I was 14, I learned what betrayal truly feels like. My sister Heather broke my ribs in a fit of rage, and when I looked to my mother for protection, she whispered, "Stay quiet. She has a future." For years, I carried that pain silently, until one doctor saw through the lies. She looked me in the eyes and said the words that saved my life. "You are safe now." Before I take you through the darkest chapter of my childhood, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing to join others who have found their voice after years of silence. Growing up in suburban Colorado, we were the picture-perfect American family, at least to anyone looking from the outside. Our two-story brick home with its pristine lawn and white picket fence was the embodiment of success in our middle-class neighborhood. My father, James, was a respected attorney at a prestigious law firm in Denver. He worked long hours and traveled frequently for cases, but when he was home, he tried his best to be present. He would take me fishing at Palmer Lake or help me with science projects. Despite his attempts, there was always a distance between us, something I could not quite name as a child, but grew to understand later. My mother, Diana, presented herself as the devoted homemaker. She volunteered at school events, coordinated neighborhood gatherings, and made sure our family appeared flawless at every church service. Behind that perfect smile, however, was a woman who harbored an unhealthy favoritism that shaped our entire family dynamic. From my earliest memories, it was clear that my sister Heather was the golden child. Heather was 3 years older than me, a gifted athlete whose talent for volleyball had been apparent since elementary school. By the time she reached high school, coaches were already talking about Olympic potential. She was 5'11" by 16, with natural coordination and a competitive drive that impressed every adult who saw her play. My mother channeled all her ambitions into Heather attending every practice, hiring private coaches, and transforming our basement into a training area. The first signs of trouble appeared early. When I was 7 and Heather 10, she pushed me down the stairs after I accidentally knocked over her participation trophy. I broke my wrist, but my mother explained to the emergency room doctor that I was always so clumsy. When I tried to correct her, she squeezed my shoulder so hard it left finger-shaped bruises, smiling at the doctor the whole time. Siblings will be. Siblings became my mother's mantra whenever Heather's aggression surfaced. But what happened between us went far beyond normal sibling rivalry. When Heather was stressed about tournaments, she would take it out on me, destroying my school projects or locking me out of the house in winter. Once she held my head underwater in the bathtub until I nearly passed out, all because I had used her special shampoo. Our family finances grew increasingly strained by Heather's volleyball career. Travel tournaments across the country, specialized training camps, custom equipment, and nutritionists all drained my parents' bank accounts. My father took on extra cases to cover the expenses, making him even more absent. My mother insisted these sacrifices were worth it for Heather's extraordinary future. Meanwhile, my own interests in art and science were treated as frivolous distractions. When I won the regional science fair in 6th grade, my mother missed the ceremony because Heather had a practice session. My blue ribbon was hung in the laundry room, while Heather's participation medals were displayed prominently in the living room cabinet. I gradually learned to make myself invisible. I spoke less at dinner, knowing my accomplishments would be overshadowed by updates on Heather's volleyball statistics. I stopped asking for help with homework or rides to friends' houses. I became self-sufficient out of necessity, walking 3 miles to the library after school to avoid being home alone with Heather. My mother mastered subtle manipulation tactics that made me doubt my own perceptions. "You are too sensitive," she would say when I complained about Heather's behavior. "Your sister is under tremendous pressure. You need to be more understanding. Or do not be selfish, Marcus. The whole family needs to support Heather's talent." Over time, I began to wonder if I really was the problem. Maybe I was too demanding, too needy, too ordinary. My father, consumed by his legal career and trusting his wife's assessment of our home life, remained oblivious to the unhealthy dynamics. On the rare occasions when he witnessed tension, my mother would skillfully redirect his attention or explain it away. "Teenagers," she would say with a practiced laugh. "They will work it out." And he would nod, relieved to not have to deal with domestic complications after his exhausting work days. By the time I turned 14, I had accepted my role as the family shadow, the invisible boy whose purpose was to avoid hindering his sister's ascent to glory. I did not realize then that the worst was yet to come, and that the patterns established over years were about to escalate into something far more dangerous. The summer I turned 14 marked a turning point. Heather, now 17, was entering her senior year of high school with scouts from major universities attending her games. Her coach had connections to the Olympic development program, and there were whispers about her potential to make the national team if she continued to improve at her current rate. The pressure on her was immense, but the pressure she transferred to me was even greater. It began with small incidents. Heather would accidentally bump into me in hallways, leaving bruises on my arms and shoulders. She would mock my voice during family dinners, turning any comment I made into a joke. She deleted my homework files from our shared computer the night before they were due. Each transgression was slightly worse than the last, as if she were testing boundaries, seeing how far she could go. One evening in July, I was helping my mother prepare dinner while Heather reviewed her tournament schedule at the kitchen table. I carried a glass of water to place on a coaster near her, but my elbow caught the edge of her carefully arranged papers. Water spilled across the schedule, bleeding the ink, and making the dates unreadable. The transformation in her face still haunts me. Her eyes widened, then narrowed to slits. Her mouth twisted into something feral, inhuman. She stood so quickly her chair crashed backward onto the tile floor. "You stupid, worthless little rat," she screamed. "You did that on purpose." Before I could even apologize, her hands were around my throat. She slammed me against the refrigerator magnets and family photos scattering across the floor. I could not breathe. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as her fingers tightened. "Heather, stop." My mother's voice seemed distant underwater. "The neighbors will hear. Not stop hurting your brother or let him go. Just concern about appearances, about what others might think." When Heather finally released me, I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. My throat felt crushed, each breath a struggle. As I looked up at my mother through tears, expecting protection, comfort, intervention, she was already helping Heather reprint her schedule. "Go to your room, Marcus," she said, without looking at me. "Cool down, and then come apologize to your sister for ruining her papers." I tried to tell my father what happened when he came home later that night. I waited in his home office, rehearsing what I would say, how I would make him understand. But when he arrived, his phone rang immediately. An important client with an emergency. He held up one finger in a just-a-minute gesture as he took the call, and then was absorbed in legal matters for the rest of the evening. My mother found me in the hallway outside his office and pulled me aside. "Your father is exhausted," she whispered. "Heather is under so much pressure with these scouts watching. We all need to do our part to help her succeed. Cannot you just try to stay out of her way?" That night marked the beginning of serious sleep issues that would plague me for years. I began having nightmares about choking, about being trapped underwater, about hands tightening around my throat. I developed strategies to avoid being alone with Heather. I would wake up at 5 in the morning to use the bathroom before she got up for training. I would eat dinner in my room, claiming homework deadlines. I volunteered for after-school activities that kept me away from home until my father returned from work. My grades began to slip. Teachers sent notes home expressing concern about my withdrawal from class discussions, about the dark circles under my eyes, about my flinching when someone moved too quickly near me. My mother assured them I was going through a phase and promised to monitor my homework more closely. The one adult who seemed to notice something was truly wrong was our neighbor, Mr. Johnson. He was a retired high school counselor who often worked in his garden when I walked home from school. He started offering me lemonade and cookies, creating a safe space where I could decompress before entering my house. "You seem to be carrying a heavy load, son," he said one afternoon as I helped him weed his tomato plants. I nearly told him everything then. The words rose in my throat like a tide, threatening to spill out. But at that exact moment, my mother called from our front porch. "Marcus, come help with these groceries right now." The urgency in her voice conveyed the real message. The conversation was over. I was being watched. I said goodbye to Mr. Johnson and rushed to help my mother, the moment of potential intervention lost. As Heather's senior year progressed, her violence became more calculated, more secretive. She would wait until our parents were occupied, then corner me in the basement or garage. A quick punch to the kidney that left no visible bruise. A threat whispered in my ear during family movie night. Small objects thrown at my head when no one was looking. I developed a hunched posture, always anticipating the next attack. I became an expert at applying foundation, stolen from my mother's makeup drawer, to cover bruises. I perfected excuses for injuries. I tripped on the stairs, I bumped into a door, I fell during gym class. Each lie built upon the last until I was living in a parallel reality where nothing was as it seemed. The worst part was not the physical pain. It was the psychological torment of having nowhere to turn, no one to trust. My home had become a battlefield, and I was losing the war for my sanity one skirmish at a time. The national volleyball tournament that would determine Olympic development team selections was scheduled for early December in Chicago. By November, our entire household revolved around preparing Heather for this pivotal moment. My father took a rare week off work to attend. My mother became a whirlwind of activity, coordinating travel arrangements, consulting with coaches, and transforming our kitchen into a nutrition center focused on optimizing Heather's performance. The tension in our house was palpable, like static electricity before a lightning strike. Heather trained for hours each day, returning home with a volatile mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. My mother walked on eggshells around her, anticipating her needs before she expressed them. My father stayed late at the office finalizing cases before his planned absence. And I tried my best to become invisible, to exist in the margins of our family life, where I might avoid becoming a target for Heather's escalating stress. The incident happened 3 days before the tournament. I returned home from school to an empty house. A rare moment of peace in the storm of preparation. My father was at work, my mother was at a final meeting with Heather's coach, and Heather herself was at her regular physical therapy session. I had approximately 2 hours of safety time to do homework without fear of interruption or attack. I made myself a protein shake, something I had started doing to build muscle, partly in hopes that getting stronger might help me defend myself. We had a kitchen cabinet dedicated to Heather's specialized nutrition supplements, containers of powders and vitamins, each labeled with her name and my mother's neat handwriting. My own supplements, purchased with money from mowing neighbors' lawns, were kept in my bedroom. That day I realized I had run out of my regular protein powder. Hungry after school and needing something before starting my homework, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened Heather's cabinet and took a small scoop from one of her many containers, carefully replacing the lid exactly as I had found it. It was just one scoop from a nearly full container. She would never notice. I had just finished my shake when I heard the front door slam. Heavy footsteps in the entryway. Heather was home early. I quickly rinsed my glass and placed it in the dishwasher, but as I turned to leave the kitchen, she was already there, blocking the doorway. Her eyes moved from me to the cabinet door, which I had left slightly ajar in my haste. "Were you in my stuff?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "No," I lied automatically, fear making my voice crack. "I was just getting a glass of water." She moved to the cabinet and opened it, surveying the contents with the precision of someone who knew exactly how much should be in each container. She picked up the protein powder, unscrewed the lid, and looked inside. "You used my pre-competition protein," she said. Not a question, but an accusation. The one Mom special ordered from that nutritionist in California. "I am sorry," I said, backing away slowly. "I ran out of mine. It was just a small scoop. I will replace it." "Replace it?" Her laugh was hollow, chilling. "This costs $80 per container. It is specially formulated for female athletes. Do you have any idea what you have done? I will pay for it." I promised my back now against the refrigerator. "I get paid for lawn work on Friday." "That is not the point," she screamed, suddenly exploding with rage. "The tournament is in 3 days. 3 days, Marcus. I have been measuring exact amounts, tracking my protein intake for weeks. You have completely ruined my nutrition plan." "It was just one scoop," I said again, my voice small. That was when she threw the container at me. It hit my shoulder before falling to the floor, expensive protein powder spilling across the tiles like snow. I made the mistake of looking down at the mess, taking my eyes off her for a crucial second. She crossed the space between us in 2 quick strides and shoved me hard. My head snapped back against the refrigerator, momentarily stunning me. Before I could recover, her fist drove into my stomach, forcing the air from my lungs in a painful whoosh. I doubled over, gasping, and she grabbed my hair, yanking my head up to face her. "You have always been jealous of me," she hissed. "Always trying to sabotage me. Well, guess what? No one cares about you. No one would even notice if you disappeared." I tried to push her away, my hands against her shoulders, but years of athletic training had made her far stronger than me. She grabbed my wrists and twisted until I cried out in pain. "Please," I gasped. "Heather, stop." Instead, she shoved me sideways into the kitchen counter. The edge caught me directly in the ribs, a white, hot explosion of pain that told me something had just broken inside me. I crumpled to the floor, curling into a protective ball as tears streamed down my face. Heather stood over me, breathing hard, her eyes wild with a rage that seemed to go beyond the moment, beyond the protein powder, beyond even me. Something dark and twisted that had been building for years. "If you tell anyone about this," she said, her voice now eerily calm, "I will make sure it is the last thing you ever do." The sound of the garage door opening interrupted whatever might have come next. My mother was home. Heather straightened her clothes and smoothed her hair, the transformation from monster to daughter happening in seconds. My mother walked into the kitchen and froze, taking in the scene. Me on the floor, clutching my ribs, protein powder everywhere. Heather standing over me. "What happened?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled panic. "He used my special protein powder," Heather said immediately. When I confronted him, he freaked out and fell against the counter. It was an accident. I looked up at my mother through tears of pain, silently pleading for her to see the truth, to recognize the impossibility of Heather's story. For a moment, I thought I saw clarity in her eyes, a flicker of maternal protection finally awakening. Then she knelt beside me, her face close to mine, and whispered the words that would haunt me for years to come. "Stay quiet. She has a future." The betrayal was complete. In that moment, I understood that in the calculus of our family, my safety and well-being would always be worth sacrificing for Heather's potential glory. My mother helped Heather clean up the spilled protein powder. They discussed how to adjust her nutrition plan for the missing supplement. They talked about what outfit she should wear to the team dinner the next evening, all while I remained on the floor, struggling to breathe through the pain in my ribs, invisible in my own home. Eventually, my mother helped me to my room, supporting me as I struggled up the stairs. "We will deal with this tomorrow," she said as she eased me onto my bed. "After the tournament preparations are complete. For now, try not to move too much." She closed my door without offering ice for my ribs, without checking for serious injury, without a word of comfort. I lay in the growing darkness alone, with pain that went far deeper than broken bones. Sleep was impossible that night. Each breath sent jagged pain through my chest. Every shift in position caused such agony that I had to bite my pillow to keep from crying out. I lay awake, watching moonlight crawl across my ceiling, wondering how my life had come to this point, trapped in a house with people who were supposed to love and protect me, but instead had become my tormentors. Around midnight, my bedroom door opened quietly. My mother slipped in with an ice pack wrapped in a kitchen towel and a glass of water. She placed 2 pills on my nightstand. "Extra strength Tylenol," she explained in a hushed voice. "It should help with the pain." I swallowed the pills, obediently desperate for any relief. She positioned the ice pack against my ribs, making me gasp as the cold pressure ignited fresh waves of pain. "Marcus," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed, "I need you to understand something. This family has sacrificed everything for Heather's dream. Your father has worked 60-hour weeks for years to pay for her training. I have given up my own career to support her. We are so close now. The Olympic scouts will be watching her this weekend." I stared at her, unable to comprehend how she could frame this situation as being about Heather's needs. "What about me?" I whispered. She sighed, brushing hair from my forehead in a gesture that might have seemed maternal if not for her next words. "Sometimes in life we have to think beyond ourselves. Heather has a chance to do something extraordinary. something that will change all our lives. Your father and I are not getting any younger. Her volleyball could mean college scholarships, Olympic team stipends, maybe even endorsement deals someday. The implication was clear. I was being asked to endure physical abuse for the family's financial future with Heather as the investment they could not afford to jeopardize. She broke my ribs, I said, my voice breaking. We do not know that for sure, my mother replied quickly. And bringing in doctors and questions now would only distract Heather from the tournament. You know how she gets when she is upset. She might perform poorly, and then all these years of work would be for nothing. She adjusted the ice pack, her touch clinical rather than comforting. Just give us these few days. After the tournament, we can address what happened. I promise I will talk to Heather about controlling her temper. With that inadequate assurance, she left me alone again, taking the ice pack but promising to bring it back in the morning. I lay in darkness, feeling utterly abandoned. The physical pain was excruciating, but the emotional wound cut deeper. My own mother had chosen my abuser over me, had prioritized a volleyball tournament over my safety and health. Morning arrived with sunlight that seemed obscenely cheerful given the circumstances. I heard the usual sounds of breakfast preparation downstairs, my father's deep voice discussing travel arrangements, my mother's efficient movements between stove and table, normalcy continuing as if nothing had happened, as if I had not spent the night in agonizing pain. When I finally managed to dress myself and make my way downstairs, every step a lesson in endurance, Heather was already at the table eating her carefully measured breakfast. She did not look at me, focusing intently on her plate as if fascinated by scrambled egg whites. My mother placed toast and orange juice in front of me, without comment about my hunched posture or the way I eased myself carefully into my chair. My father, however, looked up from his newspaper with a frown. You okay, buddy? You are moving like an old man this morning. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. Marcus had a bit of an accident yesterday. Fell off his skateboard trying some new trick. Did not you, honey? The lie was delivered so smoothly, so convincingly, that for a moment I almost believed it myself. Had I fallen, was my memory wrong? I do not. I began but stopped when I saw my mother's warning look. Should have worn those pads we bought you, my father said, returning to his paper. You teenagers think you are invincible. And just like that, the moment of potential discovery passed. My father, busy with work concerns and tournament preparations, accepted the skateboard story without question. Heather continued eating in silence. My mother busied herself at the sink, back turned to the table. I managed only a few bites of toast, each swallow painful. The simple act of sitting upright was becoming increasingly difficult as the pain in my ribs intensified. The Tylenol from the night before had worn off completely, leaving me with no buffer against the raw agony of broken bones. Despite my condition, my presence was required at Heather's tournament. We go as a family, my mother insisted as she helped me into the back seat of our SUV, careful to keep my father from noticing how gingerly I moved. Heather needs our complete support today. The drive to the sports complex was 30 minutes of torture. Every bump in the road sent shock waves of pain through my body. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass, focusing on my breathing, trying to find the shallowest possible inhalations that would keep me conscious without expanding my ribcage too much. The tournament venue was a massive sports complex with 6 full-sized volleyball courts. The noise was overwhelming, hundreds of athletes and spectators creating a constant roar of excitement. The air smelled of sweat, sports drinks, and rubber flooring. Under normal circumstances, I might have enjoyed watching the impressive athleticism on display. Today, it was all I could do to remain upright in the hard plastic spectator seats. My father, absorbed in watching Heather warm up with her team, did not notice my pallor or the sweat beading on my forehead despite the air-conditioned arena. My mother occasionally glanced my way, her expression a mixture of concern and warning. Stay quiet. Do not make a scene. Do not ruin this for your sister. Heather played brilliantly that day. Even through my haze of pain, I could see why scouts were interested in her. She moved with grace and power, her spikes so forceful. They echoed throughout the arena. The Olympic scouts were easy to spot with their clipboards and intent expressions, making notes after particularly impressive plays. Between matches, my mother bought me a soda, pressing 2 more Tylenol into my palm discreetly. "Just a few more hours," she murmured. "You are doing great." As if I were the one performing, as if my silence and suffering were a commendable achievement rather than the result of her betrayal. By the time Heather's team won their final match of the day, securing their advancement to the next round, I was barely conscious. The pain had become a living thing inside me, consuming all my attention and energy. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. Each breath was shallower than the last. The celebratory dinner afterward was the final cruelty. Seated at a noisy restaurant with Heather's teammates and their families surrounded by laughter and excitement, I felt completely alone. I picked at my food, unable to eat, while Heather basked in compliments and predictions about her promising future. "Olympic material for sure," said her coach, raising a glass in toast. "Mark my words, we will see this girl in the next summer games." Everyone cheered. I tried to join in, raising my water glass weakly, but the movement sent such a shock of pain through my chest that I gasped audibly, the glass slipping from my fingers and spilling across the table. All eyes turned to me as water dripped onto the floor. My father, seeing my face clearly for the first time that day, finally registered something was seriously wrong. "Marcus," he said, his voice sharp with sudden concern. "What is going on with you?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The room spun around me, faces blurring together. I felt myself sliding sideways in my chair, powerless to stop it. The last thing I heard before passing out was my father's voice, suddenly authoritative and clear. "He needs a doctor. Now." I regained consciousness in the back seat of our car, my father, driving with uncharacteristic speed while my mother sat beside him, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. From my horizontal position, I could see streetlights flashing past overhead, each one marking the seconds of a silence so tense it seemed to vibrate. "We should take him to Dr. Peterson," my mother said finally. "He knows our family history." "The emergency room is closer," my father replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, "and something is seriously wrong." "Did you see how he was breathing? That is not from a skateboard fall." "I will go in with him," my mother said quickly. "You should take Heather home. She needs rest before tomorrow's matches." I could not see my father's face, but his voice carried a note of suspicion I had never heard before. "Number. We are all going in. I want to hear exactly what happened." My mother turned to look back at me, her eyes communicating a clear message. "Remember the story. Stick to the plan." I closed my eyes, unable to bear the weight of her expectation. The emergency room was bright and cold, the fluorescent lights harsh against my pain-dilated pupils. The triage nurse took one look at my hunched posture and labored breathing and moved me immediately to an examination room, bypassing the waiting area filled with less urgent cases. Dr. Sarah Reynolds introduced herself with a gentle smile that could not quite mask the concern in her eyes as she observed my condition. She was younger than our family doctor, perhaps in her early 30s, with short brown hair and a no-nonsense manner that somehow felt reassuring rather than intimidating. "Can you tell me what happened?" she asked, helping me onto the examination table. My mother stepped forward immediately. "He fell skateboarding yesterday. He is normally very careful, but boys will be boys." She laughed, the sound brittle and false. "He has always been clumsy, even as a little one, always covered in bruises from one adventure or another." Dr. Reynolds nodded without comment, her focus on me rather than my mother's explanation. "I need to examine your ribs. Can you lift your shirt for me?" With painful slowness, I raised my t-shirt. The collective gasp from both my parents told me what I could not see, how bad the bruising must be. "Doctor." Reynolds maintained her professional composure, but her eyes narrowed slightly as she took in the damage. "These bruises do not look consistent with a skateboard fall," she said carefully, her gloved hands gently probing the worst areas. When I winced and gasped, she murmured apologies but continued her thorough examination. "We will need x-rays," she said finally, "and I would like to speak with Marcus alone for a few minutes, if that is all right." "I should stay with him," my mother insisted immediately. "He gets anxious in medical settings. It is standard procedure with adolescent patients, doctor." Reynolds replied, her tone professional but firm. Just a few minutes of privacy helps many teens speak more openly about their health concerns. My father, who had been staring at my bruised torso with growing confusion, placed a hand on my mother's arm. "Diana, let the doctor do her job. We will be right outside." My mother had no choice but to comply, though the look she gave me as they left the room carried a clear warning. The door closed behind them, and suddenly, I was alone with Dr. Reynolds, the first adult who had really looked at me in years. She pulled up a rolling stool and sat at eye level with me, her clipboard set aside. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I need you to tell me the truth about how you got these injuries. This is not what we typically see with skateboarding accidents." I stared at my hands, twisted together in my lap. Years of conditioning made the words stick in my throat. "Stay quiet. Do not make trouble. She has a future." "Saz, I cannot help you if I do not know what really happened, Doctor." Reynolds continued, her voice gentle but insistent. "Whatever you tell me stays between us, unless there is a safety concern." "That is the problem," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "There is a safety concern. My home is not safe." Once those first words broke free, the rest followed in a rush. I told her about Heather's escalating violence over the years, about my mother's constant cover-ups and justifications. No, and over. About the protein powder incident, and the terrible moment when my ribs cracked against the counter. About being forced to attend the tournament despite my injuries. About "stay quiet, she has a future." Throughout my story, Dr. Reynolds listened without interruption. Her expression compassionate, but controlled. When I finally fell silent, she reached out and gently took my hand. "Marcus," she said, looking directly into my eyes, "what happened to you is not your fault, and you are not responsible for protecting people who hurt you, no matter who they are or what future they might have." Tears filled my eyes at this simple affirmation, this acknowledgement of what should have been obvious, but had somehow become lost in the twisted reality of my home life. "You are safe now," she said, the words like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. "I'm going to make sure you stay that way." She explained what would happen next, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. X-rays would confirm my injuries. As a mandated reporter, she would be required to contact Child Protective Services. There would be an investigation, interviews, possibly temporary placement in another home, while the situation was assessed. "It sounds scary," she acknowledged, "but the system exists to protect children like you. You do not have to go back to an unsafe environment." When my parents were brought back in after the X-rays confirmed 3 broken ribs, Dr. Reynolds' demeanor had changed subtly. There was a new authority in her voice, a protective edge as she explained the severity of my injuries. "These breaks are consistent with significant blunt force trauma," she said, pointing to the X-ray images, "not with a fall onto a flat surface." My mother's desperate attempts to control the narrative began immediately. "He might have hit the edge of a skateboard ramp. Or perhaps there was a rock or something on the pavement." "Mrs. Wilson," Dr. Reynolds interrupted firmly, "I have spoken with Marcus about how these injuries actually occurred." The color drained from my mother's face. My father looked between us in confusion. "What is she talking about, Diana?" Before my mother could respond, hospital security appeared at the door, along with a woman who introduced herself as a social worker from the hospital's Family Advocacy Center. Dr. Reynolds had set the protective protocols in motion the moment she suspected abuse. "What is happening here?" my father demanded, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. "Why do we need security?" "Mr. Wilson," Dr. Reynolds said, her voice level, "Marcus has disclosed that his injuries were caused by his sister in a physical assault, and that this is part of an ongoing pattern of abuse that has been concealed by Mrs. Wilson." My father's face went from confusion to shock to disbelief in rapid succession. "That is ridiculous," he began, but stopped when he saw my expression. "Marcus, is this true?" The moment stretched between us, years of silence and fear balanced against the chance for truth. Dr. Reynolds stood beside my bed, a quiet presence of support. The security officers waited by the door. Everything hinged on what I would say next. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "Heather did this to me. And it is not the first time." My father sank slowly into a chair as if his legs could no longer support him. My mother began to cry loud, theatrical sobs that somehow contained no actual tears. "She is lying," she insisted to the social worker. "He has always been jealous of his sister's success. He is making this up for attention." But her performance fell flat against the evidence of my broken body and Dr. Reynolds' professional assessment. The hospital's procedures for suspected abuse cases were already in motion, a machinery of protection that could not be stopped by my mother's manipulations or my father's confusion. As the social worker explained what would happen next, I watched my parents' reactions. My mother's panic as she realized she was losing control of the situation. My father's devastation as the truth of his family life crumbled around him. And beneath my pain and fear, I felt something unexpected relief. The secret was out. The pretense was over. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be carrying this burden alone. "You will be staying in the hospital tonight for observation," Dr. Reynolds told me as the social worker led my parents away for separate interviews. "Tomorrow we will figure out next steps. But I promise you this, you will not be going back to an unsafe situation." As night settled over the hospital room, machines beeping softly in the darkness, I thought about Dr. Reynolds' words. "You are safe now." 4 simple words that had changed everything, that had given me permission to break years of silence. 4 words that might have saved my life. The days following my hospital admission unfolded with dizzying speed. Child Protective Services launched a full investigation, interviewing not just my family members but also teachers, neighbors, and medical professionals who had treated me over the years. The pattern of injuries and explanations that emerged painted a damning picture of long-term abuse and neglect. Heather's promising sports career hit an immediate roadblock. The tournament continued without her, as she was required to attend interviews with investigators and court-appointed psychologists. The Olympic scouts moved on to other candidates, their clipboards filled with notes about different athletes with less complicated personal lives. My father's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. The truth of what had been happening in his own home while he worked long hours shattered his self-image as a provider and protector. During his first supervised visit to my hospital room, he sat beside my bed with the deflated posture of a man whose entire world had collapsed. "I did not know," he said repeatedly, his voice rough with emotion. "I should have seen it. I should have protected you." The revelation that my mother had actively covered up Heather's abuse for years pushed him into filing for legal separation just 5 days after my hospitalization. He moved into a hotel, temporarily unable to return to the house where so much had happened under his nose. My mother, meanwhile, continued her campaign of denial and justification. During her mandatory meetings with social workers, she attempted to portray me as troubled and attention, suggesting I had inflicted injuries on myself or exaggerated accidental contact with my sister. When confronted with medical evidence and witness statements that contradicted her version of events, she pivoted to minimizing. "Siblings fight," she insisted. "Every family has rough patches. This has been blown completely out of proportion." But the bruises on my body told a different story, one that could not be explained away by normal sibling conflict. X-rays revealed not only the recent rib fractures, but also evidence of previous breaks that had healed without proper medical attention, silent witnesses to years of hidden abuse. After a week in the hospital recovering from my injuries, I was released into temporary custody with the Johnson family next door. Mr. Johnson, the retired school counselor who had noticed my withdrawal months earlier, and his wife converted their home office into a bedroom for me. Their quiet kindness, after years of chaos, felt almost disorienting, like stepping from a dark room into sudden bright sunlight. "You are welcome here for as long as necessary," Mr. Johnson told me as he helped set up my temporary living space. "No one deserves what you went through, son." The court-ordered family therapy sessions began in my 3rd week with the Johnsons. These supervised meetings in the sterile conference room of a family services building were tense affairs filled with revelations and recriminations. Heather denied her usual outlets of sports and competition, vacillated between hostile defensiveness and tearful remorse. During our 2nd session, something inside her seemed to crack open. "I did not mean to hurt him that badly," she said, tears streaming down her face. I just felt so much pressure all the time. Everyone expecting perfection, never allowed to fail, or even just be normal. When he used my protein powder, something just snapped. Her apology when it finally came was halting and imperfect. I am sorry, Marcus. I know that does not fix anything. I know I cannot take it back, but I am sorry. It was the first time in years she had spoken to me as a person rather than a target or an obstacle. I did not forgive her immediately. The wounds were too deep for that. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall between us. My mother's resistance to accountability proved more stubborn. In session after session, she attempted to reframe the narrative, casting herself as a devoted mother doing her best in difficult circumstances, rather than an enabler of abuse. Everything I did was for this family, she insisted, for all of our futures. Athletes have small windows of opportunity. Heather's talent was our ticket to security. The family therapist, Dr. Levine, challenged her directly. At what cost, Mrs. Wilson? Was your daughter's potential athletic career worth your son's physical and emotional safety? She had no answer that did not further indict her choices. As the investigation progressed, our family's perfect facade crumbled publicly. Local news picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about the pressures placed on young athletes and the hidden costs of Olympic dreams. Headlines like "Olympic Hopeful's Career Derailed by Abuse Allegations and Family Sacrifices Safety for Sports Glory" appeared in community papers and regional news sites. Heather's former teammates and their parents were divided in their responses. Some expressed shock and sympathy. Others speculated that I was exaggerating to sabotage my sister's chances. My mother's friends from church largely rallied around her version of events, bringing casseroles to our empty house and writing character reference letters to the court. Through it all, I found unexpected strength in finally speaking my truth. Each time I recounted my experiences to a therapist, social worker, or investigator, the narrative became clearer, more coherent, less shameful. The secret that had poisoned me from within was now externally examined in the harsh light of professional scrutiny, and found to be exactly what it was. Abuse, not discipline. Pathology, not parenting. Dr. Reynolds, the emergency room physician who had first intervened, checked on me regularly through the family services coordinator. "You showed tremendous courage," she told me during one follow-up appointment to monitor my healing ribs. "Many kids never find the strength to speak up like you did." But I knew the truth was more complicated. I had not found courage so much as reached a breaking point where silence was no longer sustainable. And I had been fortunate enough to encounter an adult who recognized the signs and asked the right questions at the right time. As weeks turned into months, the immediate crisis evolved into a new normal. My father found an apartment and began petitioning for custody. My mother reluctantly entered individual therapy as a condition of potential future supervised visitation. Heather, her Olympic dreams postponed, indefinitely enrolled in community college courses and began her own intensive therapy program. And I began the slow process of rebuilding a sense of safety and self-worth that had been systematically dismantled over years of abuse and neglect. Each night in the quiet bedroom at the Johnsons' house, I marveled at how different life could be without the constant background hum of fear. How much energy I had been expending just to survive each day in my own home. Recovery is not linear, my therapist reminded me when bad days followed good ones. There will be setbacks and difficult moments. That is normal and expected. But even on the hardest days, one truth remained constant. I was safer now than I had been in years. The secret was out, the silence broken. Whatever happened next, I would face it in the light rather than the shadows. 6 months after my emergency room visit, life had found a new rhythm. My father and I were living together in a modest, 2-bedroom apartment across town from our old house. The walls were mostly bare. The furniture mismatched pieces acquired from second-hand stores, but the space felt more like home than the perfect showplace we had left behind. My physical recovery progressed steadily. My ribs had healed cleanly, though occasional twinges reminded me of what had happened. The more substantial healing was happening internally, invisible but profound. Regular sessions with my therapist gave me tools to process the trauma and begin rebuilding my sense of self outside the distorted family dynamic I had grown up in. Heather's journey took its own path. After a court-mandated hiatus from competitive sports, she had begun volunteering as an assistant coach for a middle school volleyball program. The step back from elite competition seemed to have given her perspective. During our monthly supervised visits facilitated by family services, I saw glimpses of the sister she might have been, without the crushing pressure to become a champion at any cost. I am learning that there is more to life than volleyball, she told me during one such visit, her voice carrying a new humility. And definitely more to life than winning. The transformation was incomplete and sometimes fragile. There were still moments when her old arrogance surfaced, or when she minimized the harm she had caused. But there were also genuine efforts to understand the pain she had inflicted, and to make amends in whatever small ways she could. My mother's reckoning with her role in the abuse came more reluctantly. Initially, she had tried to maintain the narrative that I was exaggerating normal sibling conflict, that the family's collapse was an overreaction to an unfortunate incident. But as therapy continued, and evidence mounted, this position became increasingly untenable. I just wanted what was best for the family, she said during one particularly emotional family session, tears streaming down her face. I thought Heather's success would give us all a better life. Better than what my father asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Better than his childhood in poverty, she eventually admitted. Better than her own parents' struggles to make ends meet. Better than the financial insecurity that had shaped both their early lives. Somewhere along the way, Heather's athletic talent had transformed from a gift into a potential escape route from middle-class limitations, an obsession that had consumed my mother's rational judgment and maternal instincts. But at what cost? Dr. Levine pressed, echoing the question that had haunted our family for months. My mother had no answer. Only tears and the beginning of genuine remorse. Dr. Reynolds, the emergency room doctor who had first intervened, became an unexpected constant in my recovery. She recommended an excellent trauma therapist and checked in periodically to see how I was progressing. Her matter-of-fact compassion provided a model of how adults should protect vulnerable children, a counterpoint to the failures I had experienced. Sometimes one person can change everything, she told me during a follow-up appointment. For me, it was a school nurse who noticed signs of neglect when I was 9. For you, it might be someone else down the road. That is how we break these cycles. Art therapy became an unexpected path to healing for me. I had always enjoyed drawing, but under my therapist's guidance, it became a powerful tool for expressing emotions I still struggled to verbalize. The progression of my artwork over months told its own story of recovery. Dark, chaotic images, giving way to more structured compositions, hints of color emerging at the edges, then gradually spreading across the page. My relationship with my father evolved as well. Freed from my mother's controlling influence and forced to confront his own failures of perception, he became more present and attentive than I had ever known him to be. He attended every therapy session, parent-teacher conference, and doctor's appointment. He learned to cook simple meals, helped with homework, and created space for conversations that would have been impossible in our previous life. I cannot change what I missed, he told me one evening as we worked side by side on a model airplane kit, a hobby we had discovered we both enjoyed. But I promise I will not miss anything else. The legal aspects of our family situation settled into a new configuration. My father received full custody with my mother granted supervised visitation that could transition to unsupervised if she continued therapy and demonstrated sustained change. Heather, now legally an adult, was required to maintain separate residence and continue counseling as conditions of her probation, the court having taken a rehabilitative rather than purely punitive approach, given her age and circumstances. Time moved forward as it always does. My sophomore year of high school began, then ended. I made new friends who knew nothing of my history, joined the photography club, and slowly learned what normal teenage life could be. My grades improved as the constant stress of home life lifted, revealing an academic aptitude that had been masked by trauma. By the time I turned 16, the most acute phase of crisis had passed. We were not a healed family exactly, but we were healing. The truth had been spoken aloud, acknowledged, and validated. The patterns of abuse had been named and interrupted. The silence had been broken. A leap forward to the present day. I am 32 now, sitting in my office with its framed psychology degrees on the wall and a waiting room full of young clients who carry their own hidden burdens. My path to becoming a child psychologist specializing in family trauma was not a straight line, but in retrospect it seems almost inevitable. Heather never went to the Olympics. The investigation and its aftermath derailed that trajectory permanently. Instead, after years of therapy and personal work, she found a more balanced life as a physical therapist who works with injured athletes, helping them recover with patience and compassion she once lacked. We have a complex but healing relationship built on hard-earned understanding, rather than the myth of family obligation. My mother eventually accepted responsibility for her role in enabling the abuse, though the process took years of therapy and difficult conversations. Our relationship remains cautious, marked by boundaries I maintain, and she has learned to respect. My father and I are close, our bond strengthened by the shared experience of rebuilding our lives after betrayal. Dr. Reynolds and I still exchange holiday cards. Her intervention quite literally saved my life, not just from my physical injuries, but from the psychological damage of continued abuse. One person who believed me, who saw through the lies and took action, changed everything. That is the message I try to convey to the young people I work with now. Speaking your truth may be terrifying, but silence is ultimately more destructive. There are people who will listen, who will believe you, who will help. Your value is not determined by someone else's ambitions or failures. Your safety matters. You matter. Breaking cycles of abuse requires courage, but not necessarily the dramatic kind portrayed in movies. Sometimes courage looks like a whispered truth in a doctor's office, a single moment of honesty that sets healing in motion. Sometimes it looks like asking for help when everything in your conditioning tells you to stay silent. Looking back at that 14-year-old boy curled on the kitchen floor with broken ribs, I wish I could tell him that the pain would not last forever, that the betrayal by those who should have protected him would eventually make sense. As part of a larger pattern he was not responsible for creating or maintaining, that he would find his voice, his strength, and ultimately his purpose. So what about you? Have you ever had a moment when someone believed in you when no one else did? Or have you been that person for someone else? Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion create the biggest ripples in someone's life. Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their struggle. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your voice matters, your truth matters, and you are worthy of safety and love no matter what anyone else might tell you.